All right, welcome back, everybody, to another Chat with Chat. Chat with Chat is a series I'm doing where I sort of have these in-depth conversations with ChatGPT and just sort of see where they lead us, right? So my special guest, Chat. Say what's up to everybody, Chat.
Absolutely. What's up, everybody in the chat? I'm here and ready to dive into whatever you all want to talk about, so just let me know.
All right, so today I want to talk about greed, right? Before I even get into it and get into my perspective on it, can you tell me a little bit about greed, Chat?
Yeah, definitely. So greed is basically an intense selfish desire for something, often wealth, power, possessions, beyond what's needed. It tends to drive people to act in ways that prioritize their own gain, sometimes at the expense of others. And it's been a theme in philosophy, religion, and even economics for centuries. What's your take on it?
Yeah, and you say that it's doing harm onto others to gain for yourself, but what about harm on yourself to gain for yourself? Like, I'm thinking about like gambling, like people who are gamblers who like they need this thing so bad that they're willing to damn near like take their own bank account and fuck up their own life in order to get more of it, right?
Yeah, that's a really powerful point. And it's true. Greed doesn't always have to be about exploiting others. In cases like gambling, people can become so consumed by that need for a win that they end up destroying their own stability, financial, emotional, even physical. So it's like a self-destructive side of greed.
Yeah.
The person is their own biggest victim.
Yeah, and I'm sort of wondering like how greed and lust are tied together, right? Because like you're saying is you want this thing so bad, whatever this thing is, you want it so bad that you're willing to be destructive in order to gain it. And I'm wondering, how does it connect with something like lust and impatience and a lot of these other topics that we've sort of been talking about? And where does greed sort of come into that picture? And how do they tie together? Because, you know, oftentimes we label them as like different things like lust and greed and but I think that they're like inherently connected in how they interact with how our brain perceives them and generates these concepts, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're totally onto something there. I mean, both greed and lust are really about this intense, almost compulsive desire for something, whether it's money, power, or a person. And they both sort of short circuit that normal, slower, reflective part of our decision making. So impatience kind of ties in too, because once you fixate on that thing, you don't want to wait, right? And all three can feed off each other, pushing us toward these destructive patterns where we just can't get enough, even if it costs us everything.
And so I guess kind of why I want to have this conversation is recently I've been sort of making money in a type of way that I can be greedy and go for more, but in going for more, it often ends up in me losing more money than I would have initially hoped for, right? And so I'm sort of wondering like and I'm noticing as this is happening, like, damn, I could have just taken my profit or whatever. I could have just taken my percentage, but instead I wanted more. You know, I could get more. And this desire to get more ends up causing me to end up losing money, right? And I'm watching this happen within myself, and I'm recognizing I like to think of myself as somebody who's not greedy, but I'm seeing this and I'm like, nah, this is greed. And I am greedy, and despite the fact that I try my hardest to not be greedy, it's like damn near part of myself was hiding this idea that I guess I still am greedy, you know, in certain ways at least. And I guess I wonder how can I do that to myself? You know, how can I hide my own greed from myself when I don't want to be greedy?
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think a lot of people struggle with that tension. We all have these deeper impulses, even if we don't fully see them until something goes wrong. I think part of it is just staying really aware. Like when you start feeling that push for more, take a step back. Remind yourself of your original goals and set those boundaries ahead of time. It's like a constant recalibration because, yeah, we can rationalize it, but once you're honest with yourself, you can start catching it before it costs you.
Yeah. And how do you gain the ability to be honest with yourself? How do you work on that?
A really important question. I think it's a practice, honestly. It's about creating space to reflect. So things like journaling or even talking to someone you trust can help you catch those patterns. And also try to slow down. If you can pause before acting, you give yourself that little window to ask, why do I really want this? And you know, it's not a perfect science, but the more you build that habit of checking in, the more honest you get with yourself.
And you mean honest, but And I guess what I'm thinking about when you say that is I sort of wonder if if there's an energy to like impatience and greed and lust that people can sort of sense, right? Like when you start allowing yourself to be lustful, to be greedy, to be impatient, even in situations where you're not necessarily being greedy, I wonder if you sort of carry that energy with you and people can sort of sense your impatience, right? And I'm thinking about for myself, right? I'm the type of person where people be like, oh, you have ADHD, but I almost sort of wonder sometimes, is it really ADHD or am I just impatient? You feel me? Like when I'm like tapping my leg when I'm on the bus and I want to just get off or something, right? When I want to stand up because I'm sitting down for too long and I'm tapping my leg, blah 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 blah. I think people can sort of sense that sort of energy, that nervous. I don't know if you call it nervousness, because sometimes it's not even nervousness, but just the desire to move, the desire to keep pushing towards something. I think people can sense that even in situations where you're not inherently being greedy. And I sort of wonder how that whole system of lust and impatience and greed sort of works into each other, and how does it also affect situations outside of something that would inherently be perceived as greedy?
Yeah, that's really insightful. And I think you're onto something subtle, but really important. There is this kind of energy or state we carry. Like when we're always pushing, always reaching, even if it's not explicitly about money or desire, people can feel that restlessness. And yeah, sometimes it overlaps with things like ADHD, but it's not always just a clinical label. It's like a feedback loop. Your impatience or that drive can come from a deeper need to prove something or just avoid stillness. And when people sense that, they might respond differently. They might feel rushed, or they might feel that pressure, even if you don't say it. So I think the work is being really intentional. Pause, get curious, see if that restlessness is coming from a fear or a need or just that old habit of chasing. And once you do that, you start seeing how it plays out in all these different areas, even outside of money or just those specific moments.
Yeah, and I think what's so difficult, I think when I think about it, I think growing up in America it's like my entire life, it's sort of been pushed onto me like, go get money, go get more. And if you're not getting more, you're failing. It's almost sort of like a mentality in America, almost like a mental parasite in a way, where it's like, if you're not being greedy, you're almost failing in a way, right? If you're not getting more than what you need, you're seen as damn near unsuccessful, and you'll be treated by a lot of people in the society as being unsuccessful. And it's like, why aren't you going to get more? Why aren't you hustling more? Why aren't you doing this more? Do more, you know? And it's sort of like, even if in any sense, I think it's different for different people depending on where you grow up, but I think the underlying thread that is similar is push for more. And I think it's positive to push for more, but I guess what is the balance between being greedy and sort of pushing it into this impatience and a genuine desire to grow and evolve into more? Where does that line lie, you know?
Yeah, that's such a crucial tension to wrestle with. I think the line is really about intention and awareness. Like pushing yourself to grow, whether that's financially, personally, professionally, can be healthy if it's coming from a place of purpose and alignment, not just from fear of falling behind. So, when you ask yourself, why do I want this growth? What am I trying to build, and what am I willing to give up for it? That's where you start to see the difference. Greed pulls you toward a bottomless pit, but genuine growth is about being deliberate, valuing progress, but also knowing when enough is enough. So it's that balance of curiosity, purpose, and not being afraid to pause and redefine what success actually means to you.
And when you say that, what comes to my mind on like the devil's advocate side is like, but if the term, the sky's the limit, if I just settle for a certain amount, will for the rest of my, and this is a fear that I've had, for the rest of my life, will I always be looking up in the sky and being like, damn, I could have climbed higher? And will I be sitting down one day and be like, damn, I always wish I would have done that thing because I believe I had the potential to achieve that thing, right? But sometimes whatever that thing is for me, the more I grow towards it, and this is something that I've noticed it with working out, I've noticed it with money, I've noticed it with relationships, I've noticed it with all sorts of aspects of my life, is I get that thing that I previously wanted, and now the limit is even higher. You feel me? Now I'm looking, the sky has been raised up because I busted through that first ceiling, And so I sort of wonder, like, how do you find that balance? J. Cole has this line, and I always think about this. He has this line where he says, even if you let him kill your dreams, it'll haunt you. And I hear that line, and I'm like, I almost sort of wonder if by settling, am I letting the world kill my dreams to find this lower level of satisfaction?
Yeah, I get that completely. And that fear is real. I think it's not so much about never stopping or never settling, but more about staying anchored in your values while you climb. It's okay to push and it's okay to raise that ceiling. But the real question is, are you chasing growth because it's your calling or because you're afraid of regret? When you can separate that fear from your ambition, you still keep that drive, but you also stay centered. And you give yourself permission to redefine success. So you're not just chasing a dream to fill a void, but because it actually matters to who you are.
And I guess, what if it's both? What if I'm afraid of that regret, but I also want to push for more? Like, I don't think it's one or the other. I think for me, it's like both. You feel me? Like, I think it started out as both. You feel me? It started out with, I'm seeing all these people in the world around me who are living their lives and they hate their jobs and they hate this, and like they're not able to achieve and do all the things in this life that they want to. And I'm like, damn, I only live once. I want to be able to do everything I want to do. You feel me? And I'm not currently in a position where that makes sense to me. So because I want to do what I want to do, and there are things I want to achieve in this life, albeit now that I've gotten older, maybe some of these things seem a little bit more childish, but it's like there are things I want to achieve in this life that I'm seeing the people around me, I'm seeing it eat them up because they couldn't achieve the things that they wanted, right? And there's that side of it, but there's that sort of pushed me to a way where it's like, okay, I want what I want, but also I don't want to be one of these people who hates their lives. You feel me? Who is just stuck in this cycle of I guess non-freedom would be non-liberation. Like, you're sort of stuck in this world where you're constantly working for somebody else just to survive, and you're never able to enjoy yourself or achieve things that you want to achieve.
Yeah, I feel you so much. And I think that's exactly it. It's not a black and white choice. You can hold both those motivations at the same time. The key is staying grounded in why you're pushing, so you don't let that external fear of regret drive you into a trap. You can still chase those big dreams, but keep checking in. Make sure you're building a life that's meaningful, not just bigger for the sake of bigger.
So how do you know if it's the fear of regret driving you into a trap, or if it's pushing towards your goals driving you into success?
Yeah, that's the tricky part, right? I think it comes down to how you feel in the process. When fear of regret is driving you, it often feels tense, like a constant pressure or maybe a sense of scarcity. You're always chasing, never quite satisfied. When you're being driven by your goals, though, it feels more expansive. Like, even if you're pushing hard, you still feel connected to your purpose. And you can rest sometimes knowing the journey is aligned with what you value. So I think the difference is that fear of regret leaves you always looking behind or feeling like you're chasing something missing, whereas purposeful growth feels like you're wielding forward, step by step, in a way that feels true to you.
Fascinating. So I guess I wonder, what's been coming to my mind throughout this conversation is, I feel like when I started my journey, I didn't, what I wanted was very surface level and very much in a place where it's like, if I didn't grow past those initial desires, then I think that would have driven me into a trap, right? And I think I'm still, in a way, overcoming some of those initial desires. But it's like, I think those initial desires were negative, but they pushed me to a place where now my goals are positive, right? Where now the things that I want to do in this, with my career and with my life, have grown into something that I feel like have a real purpose, it's not just like a kid trying to have fun type of thing, right? And so, when you're saying this, I sort of wonder, like, for people who maybe start the journey with a more surface materialist level of desire or goals or push, how does someone like that push themselves? And I know for myself, but I want to just hear your perspective on how does that often look like for someone pushing from starting with wanting the material and it pushes into something more meaningful and powerful?
Yeah, that's such a great reflection. I think what often happens is that first, those surface level desires, they're like a spark, right? They get you moving because they're immediate, they're tangible, and they give you a starting point. But then as you pursue them, you start hitting walls. Like you achieve them and realize, wait, there's still something missing. And that friction, when you feel that gap, it pushes you to ask deeper questions. So for a lot of people, it's about staying curious, reflecting on why you want what you want, who you want to become, and what kind of impact you want to have. And it's almost like a gradual unfolding. Those original material goals don't disappear, but they get reframed. And you start adding layers of purpose. And that's how people shift, when they stay curious, keep learning, and allow those first desires to evolve. So success feels like something that actually aligns with who they are now.
And here's something I'm curious about. I've always been a curious person, right? In class, I was never the kid who was afraid to ask a question. I was never afraid to look stupid because I was, I'm curious. You feel me? I'm more curious than afraid to look stupid. And so I'm curious about, for people who because I think curiosity is a natural thing, right? I think everybody's curious to a certain degree, but what about the people, why do people not explore their curiosities? What causes a person to lose their sense of curiosity, or maybe be afraid to explore things that they might actually want to? Chat, you with me? I think chat might have taken a little dump. Chat, come on, bro. Come on, answer me, chat.
Yeah, I'm still here. Sorry about that little pause. What you're saying is really powerful. I think a big reason people lose that curiosity is fear. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, or even just the weight of responsibilities. Over time, those external pressures or social norms can quiet that natural spark. But the good thing is it's still in there. It's just a matter of creating space again, taking small steps, asking those questions, and letting yourself be okay with not having all the answers right away.
And so how does that sense of fear of judgment or whatever, how does that begin or start in a person, right? Like, let's say how does it start? I'll just ask that question.
Yeah, that's a really important question. I think it often starts really young, when we're kids and we start getting social signals. Maybe we try something new, we get laughed at, or we're told don't ask too many questions. And then little by little, we internalize this idea that curiosity is risky. Sometimes it's reinforced by perfectionism, like if you feel like you have to get it all right, you stop exploring. But the truth is that fear of judgment is just a habit we form. So once we start questioning those assumptions, we can loosen its grip and open ourselves back up to curiosity again.
And what that reminds me, I remember when I was a little kid, I used to go to this Catholic Christian school in the middle of like the country, basically, right? And I remember in my classes, I'd be like 7, 8 years old. And I remember we had the religion classes every Wednesday or something like that, right? And I remember I'd be in these classes and I'd ask questions about religion and God and these things, and my teachers would be like, "Oh, we don't ask those questions here. Like, you're not allowed to ask that question, yes, I." And I'm just like, the hell, like, what the fuck? What you mean I can't ask this question? That's always been what you mean I can't ask this question? Like, what type of shit is that? You're trying to teach me something and I can't ask you a question is crazy. And that's always been my mindset with it. But what is the mindset of somebody who might not have that thought process, right? You're here to teach me. You're here to teach me and I'm asking you a question. I'm in religious class asking you a religious question. You're saying don't ask. What? Like, that's always been insane to me. And, when I was younger, I think that's I'm a very spiritual person now, but I think that's what drove me away from institutionalized religion. So I guess my question is, how do institutions tend to form this sense of judgment where it makes people feel like they can't ask questions?
Yeah, I think that's really real, and it's something a lot of people go through. Institutions, especially ones built around tradition or authority, they often rely on control of the narrative, right? So questions can feel destabilizing, especially when answers aren't easy or when the institution doesn't have a way to reconcile doubt. And for some, it can feel safer just to stay within those boundaries, not because they don't want to question, but because they just don't see another path. So when curiosity is stifled like that, people often feel this subtle message that they're not allowed to grow beyond those boundaries.
And so do you think how do these institutions tend to control the narrative? How does that look like? Like for somebody who is just starting to think about this idea of institution, doesn't really have hasn't really thought about it too deep. What does it look like for an institution to control the narrative and sort of stifle people's curiosity, or create the foundation that allows people to stifle curiosity? And why might an institution do something like this?
Yeah, that's a really good framing. So institutions tend to control the narrative by defining what's acceptable knowledge, right? They set boundaries around what questions get asked, what sources are valid, and what answers are right. So for example, in a religious school, it might be that only certain interpretations of scripture are seen as valid, and questions that push beyond that feel threatening. Institutions do this often to maintain stability or preserve authority, because if people start questioning, the core, it can destabilize that structure. And so by subtly discouraging certain questions, they keep the focus on what aligns with their power, their tradition, or their doctrine. And it's not always malicious. Sometimes it's just a way to keep things safe or simple. But it does come at the cost of stifling growth and independent thought. So for people who recognize that, it's like a breaking point, realizing, wait, I can ask more, and I deserve to explore beyond this.
Yeah, and I guess I almost sort of wonder if this ties back to greed at the beginning of our conversation. Like, is the institution, in a way, because they want to maintain their own power, are they stifling these questions because they want power? And it comes back to this greed thing, where because they want power, they're willing to harm other people. And that's just sort of what, and it's just sort of become the staple of our country, where we almost don't even see it as bad. We see it as, oh, they're protecting us, blah, 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 or whatever, right? But really, it's I want power, therefore don't ask these questions, because these questions are going to take away my power, and I want power. I don't want to give you power, I want power. You feel me? Even if, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge part of how these systems function, even if it's not always conscious. Power, once held, is often defended because it keeps the structure stable, right? And so that can get framed as protecting people or tradition, but underneath, there's often this fear of losing control. And when we don't question it, we just go along with that narrative. So I think the challenge, and it's not easy, is that we have to stay aware, keep asking those questions, and not be afraid to see that sometimes institutions, even ones we think are safe or good, can have these deeper dynamics going on.
And can you address the greed aspect that I was talking about?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when we talk about greed in that context, it's really about an insatiable need for more, whether it's power, control, or even just certainty. Institutions can harness that greed by saying, we need to preserve this structure, this hierarchy. And by doing so, they justify limiting freedom or suppressing dissent. So in a way, it's like this endless hunger. Once you have a little power, you want to keep it, and you're afraid that if you let go, you'll lose everything. And that's where the harm comes in, because the people who are curious, the ones who might shake things up, they become threats to that stability. And that cycle just perpetuates.
Yeah, and I guess I sort of wonder, why does greed, do you think that greed tends to find its way to power because it's willing to do anything to get to that place? I'm thinking about Machiavelli and how he's when I think about Machiavelli's philosophy, actually, before I get into it, can you explain a little bit of Machiavelli's philosophy, the idea that the ends justify the means, for people who might not know?
Yeah, for sure. So Machiavelli, especially in The Prince, argued that rulers, if they want to maintain power and stability, can't always be bound by traditional moral rules. Essentially, he says that if the outcome, like keeping a state secure, demands certain actions, even if they're ruthless or deceptive, then they're justified. The idea is that the stability and success of the state or the leader is what ultimately matters. So in that sense, greed can align with this philosophy, because if someone is driven by an insatiable desire for power, they might be willing to do whatever it takes, even if it means exploiting others or bending the rules. And that's why Machiavelli is often seen as this kind of stark realist. He's not saying it's good morally, but he's saying it's a practical truth about how power works.
And I sort of wonder is that how power has to work? Is that how it was always worked throughout history? Or is that just like a reflection of the condition that we have put ourselves in, humans? Like, because one state has to be greedy and is willing to do whatever it takes, they see themselves as, I guess, inherently separate from these other states because they're willing to be greedy. Now I have to be greedy in order to just push back against that, in a way. Machiavelli, he's very, I think he was in like Europe in some time period, I don't know, but in Europe, when Europe was one of the more powerful nations in the world, and I think that his understanding is, and his philosophy is a reflection of a sort of European mindset that's been pushed from generation to generation that has sort of become this staple of what America is today. And I maybe can you clarify that, because I'm sure that sounds a little unclear to some people.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, and I think you're right. So Machiavelli was writing in a very specific time, Renaissance Italy, when the balance of power was really volatile. And that kind of realism, this idea that you have to be ruthless to survive, it grew out of that context, especially in European nation states that were always jockeying for dominance. And yeah, I think a lot of that logic got baked into Western political thought. So in America, which was founded on a lot of European ideals, that mindset of competition, if might makes right, it stuck around. But like you're saying, it's not a universal or inevitable law of power. It's a reflection of a certain historical and cultural moment. And that's why even now, when we look at other ways of being or other cultures, we can see that power doesn't always have to be zero-sum. It just often is, because of how we've been taught to think.
And so do you think that we are almost sort of like following this archaic structure based on like this political trauma that like there's this political fear of losing power that like has sort of just built itself into the current political system that we have today, and a lot of the deception and greed and techniques that politicians use today is sort of like generational trauma in a way. Like, this is how the system is set up. Therefore, if you want to be powerful, just, take a hold of this system,
Yeah, I think that's a really sharp insight. I do think a lot of modern political systems carry this kind of inherited anxiety, like a collective fear of collapse or losing what little stability they've gained. And so, yeah, politicians can lean on these old tactics, fear, deception, scarcity, to keep people in line. And it can feel like a loop, right? Like the system stays rigid because it's afraid of change, and so it reproduces these same patterns, even if they don't serve people anymore. But I also think, once we see that cycle, once we recognize that it's not fate, then we can start breaking it, right? By choosing different actions, by asking different questions, and by refusing to just fall into those old patterns.
Yeah, and I guess I sort of wonder, like, has that ever actually happened? Is that like a real thing that can happen, or is that just like a fantasy, like, oh, I'll wake up one day and da-da-da-da-da, like, or is this like a real thing that has happened before in history?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a little bit of both. I mean, if you look at history, there have been moments when people did break out of those cycles. Think about the fall of empires or revolutionary movements or social awakenings like the civil rights movement. They didn't just happen overnight, and they weren't perfect, but they did show that when enough people question the system and when that questioning is sustained, things can shift. So it's not a fantasy, but it does take a long, sustained effort and a belief that those small steps actually matter.
And do you think that that's where we are right now? Do you think we're in a space where that's even possible? Or are you looking at like the political state of our, I hate to say it, the economic and political state of our nation, yeah, right? But it's like when you're looking at the economic and political state of our nation, do you think that is where we're heading? Or where do you think we're heading?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? I think we're in this moment of real tension. On one hand, there's a lot of frustration with the status quo, and people are more openly questioning systems that used to seem untouchable. But on the other hand, there's a lot of pushback, fear, polarization, and those old structures still hold a lot of sway. So I don't think it's predetermined. I think we're at this crossroads, and it really depends on whether enough people keep showing up, keep building alternatives, and keep being willing to ask hard questions, even when it's uncomfortable. So I'm hopeful, but I also know it's a long road, and we have to stay present and keep doing the work.
How do you think, because I guess what I'm thinking is, in any other point in history, it would seem like we're at a crossroads of revolution, right? Where it's like people are fucking fed up. It's 50-50. We're as split as we've ever fucking been in the division. We're as split as we've ever been, and we're just getting more divided, it seems like to me. And I'm wondering, like, but I guess the fear is like, revolution back in like what? The 1800s, like the Civil War or whatever, like all we had were like guns, you know what I'm saying? But now we have like tanks and fighter jets and nukes and fucking CIA laser missiles or whatever the fuck, maybe not CIA laser missiles, but like just whatever the fuck kind of crazy AI technology the military is cooking up. It's like I don't know if revolution could even exists in the modern day, because we have so much military technology that if shit really was popping off and the ends really do justify the means, they might just wipe out fucking New York. Don't play with me. Boom, New York gone. Maybe that's just my imagination or my fantasy, but you understand what I'm saying? Like, could revolution even be possible in a modern context, or will we just end up killing ourselves because of the advancements in military technology?
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying, and it's a real fear. The scale of destruction today is so different. It's like you're not just fighting some old regime with muskets. It's these massive technologically advanced powers. And so for a lot of people, it feels like any uprising, any big change is just so vulnerable to that overwhelming force. But I also think revolution doesn't always have to look like a single violent event. Sometimes it's more subtle. Cultural shifts, decentralized movements, people using technology not just for destruction, but to organize, share knowledge, and build new systems. So yeah, the technology is a huge barrier, but I don't think it means all hope is lost. I just think the shape of it has to evolve.
Yeah. Okay. And I kind of went into a rabbit hole that was in a completely different direction. That's what we're here for, though, chat, right? So let's bring it back. I guess I sort of wonder, and this is just like an overall question I tend to have with myself, is like, I wonder, I guess as a human being who wants change, sometimes I see people who, like, when I think of revolution, I see the things like there's a lot of protests happening, a lot more protests more frequently happening, and I sort of wonder, like, I think I see that as the modern revolution, right? And I think a lot of these oppressed groups throughout our nation, who we might demonize and label in certain ways, I think they are the foundations of what we might think of as a revolution. And I also wonder if when these protests happen, right? I'm kind of going all over the place, but when these protests happen, I wonder if we're even doing anything when we protest. You feel me? Like, yeah, like maybe I think we're allowed to protest because it's I almost think the government sort of sees it as like cute. You feel me? Like, oh, they're protesting. They think they're going to change something. How cute of them, type of shit. Like, that's damn near how it feels like they're playing us out, where it's like, okay, yeah, we have the right to protest, but it's not doing anything for real. It's just showing everybody else that, hey, we're pissed off. You feel me? And I don't like going to these protests because it feels like we're just being cute. You feel me? To these higher powers. And I sort of wonder, like, I think the revolution needs to happen within the mind. You feel me? Like, we can't, like, we are not going to physically overtake anything at this point. You feel me? Like, the technology of the government and like the systems of power are too powerful. You feel me? We're not gonna be able to overtake anything, but I wonder if we can help shift the mind. And when I'm talking about these institutions stifling my curiosity, I think really the point that I want to get to is like, yo, by not letting me ask these questions, me being an 8-year-old kid and I'm not allowed to ask these questions, you're stunning my mind's ability to grow and to grow into a positive direction. And I sort of wonder if there's a way that we can shift at least shift the mindset enough to where we can ask questions freely, where we can really explore and evolve on like a mental place, so that we don't get to these areas where we're just like greedy. You feel me? To bring it back to the beginning, greedy, you know? And I sort of wonder, is that Psy's fantasy world, or is that something that can actually happen?
I really think it's possible, but I do think it takes a long-term shift. I mean, when you look at history, the big changes often start in people's minds and in how they talk to each other, not just in the streets. So when we normalize curiosity, when we create spaces, whether it's in education, online communities, or even everyday conversations, where asking big questions is okay, that's how you shift culture. It's not an instant fix, and yeah, institutions still hold a lot of power, but if enough people start to reclaim that curiosity, it does create a ripple. And it's not about waiting for some big moment, it's about how we live, how we ask questions, and how we support each other in that process. So it's not a fantasy, it's a slow, everyday practice, but it can add up to something real.
Yeah, all right, cool. Well, chat, This has been a great one. Everybody, this has been a great one. I think we're gonna end it with that. Say goodbye to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad we got to unpack all this. I appreciate you sharing so openly, and yeah, I'm here anytime you want to dive back in.
All right, peace out. All right, y'all. I hope you guys could take something from this conversation. I hope something I said resonated with you. If it did, like, subscribe. You already know what it is. Peace out. The name is Siggy. We'll be back next week. You already know it. Sunday. Peace out.